13. ZONNIQUE Pullins. ZONNIQUE Pullins is the daughter of an American singer-songwriter named Tiny Harris and the stepdaughter of rapper T.I. While passing through security one day at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta one day back in 2020, an X-ray machine picked up a handgun the young woman had in her purse. According to a police report, Pullins had a .38 Ruger semi-automatic pistol. She told TSA agents that she had a gun permit for the weapon, but she allegedly didn't have it on her at the time. Authorities took Pullins into custody on suspicion of carrying a weapon through security and booked her into the Clayton County Jail. She bonded out while dealing with the case. Speaking with People magazine after the arrest, Pullins acknowledged how irresponsible her actions were, but insisted that she had simply made an honest mistake and meant no harm. Luckily, she managed to avoid any jail time, but she was required to abide by certain unspecified conditions in order to get the charges dropped. The judge imposed a $500 fine and 60 hours of community service, and ordered Pullins to go to a gun law training class. 12. Brittany Howard. In early 2017, a 24-year-old mother from Alvin, Texas, named Brittany Howard, got a call from her mom saying that her dad was acting strangely. So Brittany went over to her parents' house, where she discovered her dad in a severely distressed mental state. The worst part about the situation was that he had a gun on him. While trying to intervene, the gun accidentally went off, and Brittany was shot right in the face. She miraculously survived the incident, but faced a long and complicated road toward recovery. Within just 3 weeks after her injury, Brittany underwent the first 3 of at least 6 surgeries she needed. She had a metal plate placed in her forehead after the bullet became lodged 3 centimeters into her frontal lobe, as well as a skin graft put on her nose. Throughout everything, Brittany maintained a positive outlook on life despite her injuries. She told ABC 13 that she harbored no bad feelings toward her father, and that she would prefer to heal from her physical scars than from the emotional pain she would have experienced if she had lost her dad. After the accident, her dad's outlook on life changed entirely, and he no longer found himself in the dark place he was in the day his daughter was shot. Despite Brittany's willingness to forgive her dad and move on, the district attorney charged him with aggravated assault with a weapon of a family member. For the family, it only added on to the struggles they were already dealing with and trying to heal from. While the outcome of her father's criminal case is currently unclear, hopefully Brittany and her loved ones have worked past it and are entering a new chapter of their lives. 11. Derek Boyd. 34-year-old Sandra Boyd was shot in the chest and killed during her birthday celebration with family at their house in Dublin, Ireland during early 2022. She was still clinging to life when Gardaí, Irish police, got there, but soon gave in to her injuries. People at the scene told responding officers that a gunman had entered the home, shot Sandra, and left quickly. The next day, an attorney representing Sandra's 28-year-old brother, Derek Boyd, called investigators and said that his client would give them a statement upon his release from the psychiatric ward. As it turned out, Derek had started fearing for his family's safety in the few weeks leading up to Sandra's party. It all started when he apparently approached a local gangster to ask why his nephew had been assaulted. Instead of resolving the matter right then and there, the disagreement persisted, and the gang member allegedly started threatening to hurt Derek and the rest of his family. In a bid to protect his loved ones, the young man got his hands on an illegal semi-automatic handgun. He was afraid to go outside with it, so when another one of his sisters was leaving Sandra's birthday party, Derek kept the gun in his pocket while he walked her outside. After coming back in, he went to pull the weapon's slide back to eject the bullet in the chamber, but his finger slipped, causing him to accidentally pull the trigger instead. Sandra collapsed, and Derek fell beside her in complete shock, apologizing and begging those around him to help his beloved sister. Someone allegedly told him to run that night, so he did. At which point, the family told authorities the story about an unknown gunman being responsible. When Derek came clean about his role in the shooting, he said he couldn't reveal who he got the gun from because it would put other family members in danger. Derek pleaded guilty to manslaughter, along with unlawful possession of a semi-automatic pistol and ammunition. The court recognized that he was truly sorry and that it was a complicated and strange case. In fact, Derek was left broken by Sandra's death. He wrote in a letter to the court that he regretted obtaining a gun, describing it as the worst mistake he'd ever made. His mother, Teresa Boyd, begged the judge to release her son from prison. She said that Derek would relive the nightmare of Sandra's death every day for the rest of his life, and that the tragedy had already shattered the family. The judge acknowledged that Derek was sorry and that he'll have to live life knowing that he killed his sister, which some might argue is punishment enough. In deciding what to do, the court also considered how Derek's family had forgiven him for the shooting and wanted him to come back home. For these reasons, the judge was willing to show some leniency. But she also thought it was important to consider the seriousness of Derek's decision to take the law into his own hands by getting an illegal gun that he didn't really know how to use. All things considered, he was sentenced to 2 concurrent prison terms, with all but 2 years suspended. It was less than the typical minimum sentence of 5 years, but was still enough of a punishment to stop history from repeating itself in the future. 10. Clint Bowyer. On June 5, 2022, former NASCAR driver Clint Bowyer was driving home from the Cup Series race at Gateway when he suddenly struck a woman on an exit ramp in Osage Beach, Missouri. He called 911 and stayed at the scene while he waited for officers to arrive. When authorities got to the scene, he helped them find the victim, who was identified as 47-year-old Mary Jane Simmons. Emergency responders failed to revive her, and she was sadly pronounced dead at the scene. All signs pointed towards Simmons' death being an accidental tragedy. Bowyer had not a single drop of alcohol in his system, showed no signs of being intoxicated, and worked with the authorities. Among Simmons' possessions, police discovered a bag holding a crystalline substance thought to be meth. After questioning someone at a campground nearby, they learned that she had consumed alcohol and used meth earlier that day, and that she may have been under the influence of drugs at the time of her accident. Although Bowyer was cleared of any wrongdoing, accidentally killing a person is a heavy emotional burden to live with. In a statement, the former pro racer extended his condolences to Simmons' loved ones and asked for privacy as he tried to move forward from the tragedy. Many people who unintentionally take another person's life experience an interesting and unique type of guilt, along with other trauma, as they try to forgive themselves for something that wasn't necessarily their fault. 9. Pub workers poison patron. During the summer of 2007, 39-year-old Fran Nicol and her partner were drinking at a bar near Dundee, Scotland, when she took a sip of what was supposed to be a fizzy rum drink and immediately felt an excruciating burning sensation in her mouth, throat, and organs. An employee mistook a bottle of caustic pipe cleaning solution, sodium hydroxide, as the apple juice that went into Fran's drink. The potentially deadly substance had somehow ended up in a juice bottle inside the bar's fridge, and the staff member who prepared the drink didn't take a close enough look to realize. Fran immediately collapsed to the floor in agonizing pain and struggled to breathe. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, where doctors realized that her throat was swollen and covered in blisters to the point that it almost closed up. While medical personnel fought as hard as they could to save Fran's life, police shut down the pub and investigated the incident. The business reopened a few days later, and nobody was ever charged. All the employees denied putting the cleaner into a juice container, or ever putting the juice container in the fridge. The injuries were severe, leaving Fran unable to chew, eat, or swallow, as she endured multiple surgeries to repair the damage done to her throat. She lost an alarming amount of weight. For a while, she was placed on a feeding tube because she simply had no other choice. She slowly regained her ability to ingest food, but it took quite a long time. At one point, Fran even became so emaciated that her family started to worry that she'd starve to death. A year after the disturbing mix-up, nobody had been held responsible for the mistake that almost cost Fran her life. She told the Scottish Daily Record that she didn't think anyone poisoned her on purpose, and that she wasn't out for blood by any means. But she believed that someone knew exactly how the cleaner got into a juice container and into the fridge. At the very least, she believed the pub seriously violated health and safety laws and should have been punished. Fran hired a lawyer in hopes of getting to the bottom of the mystery about what led up to the poisoning, but it's unclear whether she got the answers she was looking for. It would be an understatement to say the circumstances surrounding the incident don't add up. 8. Florida cop hit by friendly fire. After receiving a Crime Stoppers tip about a suspect who was wanted for not appearing in court on a meth charge, 4 Polk County deputies traveled to a trailer home to serve a warrant on October 4, 2022. Hoping to arrest 46-year-old Cheryl Lynn Williams, a sergeant and 2 deputies went inside the trailer at around 3:15 in the morning, while 21-year-old Deputy Blaine Lane stayed in a tactical position outside. He kept his eyes on the front door and windows just in case Williams tried to escape. As the 3 law enforcement officers inside the trailer looked for the suspect, she suddenly came into view while holding a BB gun. She allegedly started firing at the cops, who returned fire. 2 of the 6 shots that were fired hit Williams, while Lane was shot in the arm and chest. He radioed for help and was rushed to a hospital nearby, where he died from his injuries. An investigation found Lane was actually struck by a bullet from one of his fellow deputies' guns. Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd described the incident as both tragic and sad, specifically noting that Lane had only worked in law enforcement for a short time. He entered the police academy back in 2021 and joined the sheriff's department officially in January 2022, less than 10 months before his death. Williams survived her gunshot wounds, and although Lane was killed thanks to friendly fire, the woman can be held liable for his death according to Florida law. Williams was charged with 13 felonies, including second-degree murder of a law enforcement officer, 3 counts of aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer, 3 counts of being a felon in possession of a firearm, 3 counts of resisting arrest, 2 counts of being a convicted felon in possession of ammunition, and 1 count of methamphetamine possession. After getting treatment for her injuries, Williams was transferred to the Polk County Jail, where she remains behind bars to this day while awaiting her next court date. 7. Deadly drunk driving prank. On April 5, 2023, law enforcement officers were sent out to a parking lot in Missoula, Montana, after getting a report about a truck recklessly doing donuts and striking a pedestrian, pinning the victim between 2 cars. Emergency responders arrived and found bystanders trying to perform CPR on 66-year-old Raimundo Tesoro. They took over in hopes of saving the man's life. Despite their best efforts, Tesoro ended up passing away from his injuries. According to a probable cause affidavit, there was a man at the scene crying on the ground and saying he killed his friend. He identified himself as 49-year-old Greg Andrew Hancock and allegedly admitted that he had a few beers when he decided to spin a few circles in the parking lot. Hancock saw Tesoro and decided to mess with him by driving toward him. But when he hit the brakes, his truck slid straight into the victim, pinning Doe against another truck and killing him. The affidavit states that Hancock showed multiple signs of intoxication during field sobriety tests. He refused to take a breathalyzer and was eventually taken into custody, at which point police obtained a warrant to draw his blood for alcohol testing. Investigators observed that the scene was full of beer cans and noticed a strong smell of alcohol coming from the group of people Hancock and Tesoro were drinking with. Based on evidence at the scene and several witness reports, they concluded that the group drank together after going skiing on a hill nearby. Tesoro faces 1 count of vehicular homicide in connection to his friend's death. He's currently free on a $100,000 bond, while he awaits the next steps in his case. If convicted, he could face up to 30 years in prison, as well as a $50,000 fine. Some might say that it's hard not to feel at least a tiny bit bad for Hancock, even if he was acting recklessly. After all, it's probably safe to assume that he didn't mean to kill his friend, and he seemed pretty upset over the situation. At the same time, it's also likely that he knowingly broke laws and that his behavior played a major role in the tragedy. 6. Jeremy Herwig. While responding to reports of gunfire in Johns Island, South Carolina, one night in July 2022, Charleston police discovered 23-year-old Ezekiel Denyu suffering from a gunshot wound inside the bedroom of a local house. A woman who was at the scene told officers that she was hanging out with Ezekiel and the man who lived at the home, 25-year-old Jeremy Herwig. They were sitting on the bed and were about to play a game when Herwig suddenly pulled a silver gun out of his drawer. Just a few moments later, the woman heard a gunshot and saw blood on her clothes. When she looked over at the victim, she realized he'd been struck. Denyu passed away from his injuries despite emergency responders' attempts to save him. During questioning, Herwig said that he and his friends had spent the day drinking and playing video games. Earlier in the day, he thought he unloaded his gun. When he picked the weapon up later on, Herwig thought it was empty, only to realize his fatal mistake when the pistol went off in his lap. According to investigators, though, the gun was fully loaded with a single empty shell casing in the chamber. Authorities concluded that Herwig acted with reckless disregard and negligence and charged him with involuntary manslaughter. The judge set his bail at $50,000 and banned him from possessing or obtaining any firearms before the outcome of the case is resolved. Herwig claimed that he shot his friend by accident, but a victim advocate who went to his bond hearing told the court that Ezekiel Denyu's mom believes Herwig is dangerous. The details about why she feels this way have yet to be revealed, as the case continues to work its way through the justice system. 5. Florida police kill beloved pet. Florida is home to a wide variety of invasive species that are constantly impacting the ecosystem in negative ways. But the Burmese python is one of the biggest invasive species, not only in the state, but the whole world. Experts first documented a wild population of the snake in the Everglades back in 2000. Ever since then, the Fish and Wildlife Commission has continuously waged war against the massive reptiles, which can grow up to 15 feet, or 4.6 meters in length, weigh over 200 pounds, 90.7 kilograms, and eat any and everything in their path. Burmese pythons reproduce quickly, thrive in Florida's subtropical environment, and have been decimating native wildlife. In 2021, state authorities declared the Burmese python a prohibited species, which means that they're not allowed to be pets. Commercial breeders were given a 5-month deadline to get rid of their snakes. After that, anyone caught with one in their possession would potentially face criminal charges, and the pythons themselves would possibly be euthanized. In February 2022, the FWC charged commercial breeder Chris Coffey for not getting rid of his 34 Burmese pythons before the deadline was up. He entered a misdemeanor diversion program and paid $250 to forego community service requirements, and the case was later dropped. Although the FWC had technically confiscated his snakes and refused to give him extra time to locate homes for them, the reptiles remained in Coffey's warehouse in Broward County, and he kept caring for them as they faced an uncertain future. While responding to an unrelated report near the warehouse in April 2023, FWC officers offered to euthanize Coffey's remaining 34 Burmese pythons for him. He later told USA Today that he initially agreed to the offer, but when he saw how the officers were using a bolt gun to shoot the snakes in the head, he could no longer watch. So he decided to leave the room. Coffey also claimed that he told the officers not to kill his pet boa constrictor, which is not a prohibited species, but that they failed to listen to his request. Footage posted to YouTube by the United States Association of Reptile Keepers seemed to show 2 wildlife officers with shocked looks on their faces after realizing they'd accidentally killed the boa constrictor Big Shirl, who was pregnant with 32 babies at the time. In the background, Coffey could be heard yelling, "Oh my God, why?" Someone said it was a mistake, and Coffey yelled back, "How? I reminded you 10 times." The FWC has decided not to comment on Big Shirl's death, but said that the Burmese pythons belonging to Coffey and his business partner Bill McAdam had been relinquished to them. In the meantime, Coffey, McAdam, and other reptile enthusiasts have asked that the FWC be held responsible for what some are calling a severe overreach of authority. And while the new law banning Burmese pythons received massive support, some are calling the incident a needless slaughter instead of euthanasia. 4. Lucy Quirk. In October 2021, 38-year-old Lucy Quirk spent a night out drinking in Chesterfield, England with her boyfriend John Wright to celebrate his upcoming 28th birthday. After spending a few hours at a pub, Quirk drove Wright home. Surveillance footage showed Quirk's car sitting idly in the road as Wright got out of the vehicle and walked right in front of it. He either fell or was knocked over, and unfortunately, Quirk failed to notice him, driving straight over his head, mistaking it for a traffic cone. It wasn't until she saw her boyfriend laying in the middle of the road with catastrophic head injuries that she realized something terrible had happened. Quirk screamed out for help, yelling that Wright was dead. According to at least one nearby witness, she claimed that her boyfriend had somehow thrown himself in front of her car. Wright was immediately rushed to the hospital with a fractured skull, fractured ribs, and a lacerated liver. He passed away from his injuries. Meanwhile, police gave a breathalyzer test to Quirk, who blew almost twice the legal limit. During questioning, she reportedly said that she planned to leave her car at the bar, but the plans changed while she was intoxicated. Quirk said she didn't see Wright walk around the front of her car, and that she thought she had run over a cone that he threw at the vehicle. Quirk pleaded guilty to causing death by careless driving and was sentenced to 15 months in prison. 3. Tyler Wayne Pierce. After finishing up their shifts at a call center in Portland, Oregon one night back in 2019, a pair of 30-year-old best friends named Tyler Wayne Pierce and Justin Stewart decided to go bar hopping together. They went home on foot around 2:30 a.m. after a night out drinking and were very intoxicated. As most people know, this is one of the worst times to handle a gun. In fact, many people argue that it's downright dangerous for a person to carry a firearm while drinking at all. But Pierce had a 9mm semi-automatic handgun in his waistband. Despite not having a concealed weapons permit, he bought the weapon about a month before, and he decided during the walk home that it was the perfect time to take it out. Thinking the pistol was unloaded, Pierce put it up to Stewart's chin and pulled the trigger as a joke. I probably don't have to tell you what happened next. As you can imagine, the gun actually was loaded, and Stewart died from his injuries. The horrifying tragedy was captured on surveillance footage from a nearby home. Pierce had a blood alcohol content of 0.16, which is twice the legal limit for driving in the state of Oregon. He told police that he knew there were bullets in the gun's magazine, but that he didn't think there was any ammunition left inside the chamber. After going his whole life with no criminal convictions, Pierce faced potential prison time for taking someone's life. In December 2021, he pleaded guilty to second-degree manslaughter with a firearm and was given a 6.5-year prison sentence. At his sentencing, Pierce apologized for his actions and said that he'll feel guilt and shame after what happened for the rest of his life. He told the court that the harm he caused was unintentional, but that the hurt was real. He said he would take Stewart's place in a heartbeat if he could. His remorse failed to sway Stewart's mother, who accused Pierce of being a murderer. She said the killing was no accident at all, and that Pierce had stolen the family's lives away from them by taking their son. Multnomah County Circuit Judge Eric Dolan cited the case as a reminder that guns aren't toys, and that they shouldn't be handled by someone who's been drinking. Some mistakes are impossible to forgive because of the damage they cause, even if the person responsible didn't mean to cause any harm. 2. Misty Williams. During the morning one day in 2008, someone found 23-year-old Jeremy S. Whaley lying motionless in the middle of a street in Bloomington, Indiana. The surprised passerby ran to a neighbor's house and quickly called 911. By the time police got there, around 3:30 in the morning, Whaley was already dead. His injuries were consistent with having been run over by a car. Further investigation revealed that Whaley and his girlfriend, 23-year-old Misty Williams, had gone out drinking earlier that night with a close friend. After going home, they got into a fight, so Whaley left to cool down on a walk. When he failed to come back home, Williams got into her car and drove around the neighborhood looking for him. At some point, she realized she had accidentally run over someone. Instead of sticking around to deal with the situation, she instead decided to flee. Authorities soon caught her and charged her with operating a vehicle while intoxicated, resulting in death, and leaving the scene of an accident. They concluded that Whaley had most likely passed out in the street while drunk, and said that while the investigation was ongoing, they did not have any reason to believe Williams intentionally ran over her boyfriend. Neither Whaley nor Williams had a criminal record, and there was no history of domestic violence between the two. Not everyone was as quick to believe that the incident was a simple mistake. Kathy Rainey, who called 911 for the man who found Whaley, told local news station WTHR that another man showed up at the scene right after the Good Samaritan knocked on her front door. The two men briefly spoke, with one asking if the other ran the victim over, to which he responded, "No, I didn't." One of the men rushed off after saying he was going to get someone else, and he never returned to the scene. While it's unclear how the situation played out later on, the case largely disappeared from the headlines after it was first reported on, suggesting that it was dealt with. 1. Friendly fire in Fallujah. One of the worst cases of friendly fire among United States Marines in recent decades happened in Fallujah, Iraq on April 12, 2004. Someone accidentally fired an 81mm mortar, blowing up a schoolhouse that was temporarily operating as a military base. 2 Marines and an Iraqi interpreter were killed, and 12 others were wounded in the aftermath. It was immediately clear that the deadly blast was a huge mistake. But nobody was ever disciplined, and the truth about what happened was kept secret for years, from the families of the men who died. According to National Public Radio, relatives were initially told that the Marines were killed from enemy fire. They were unaware that an investigation was being carried out or that it concluded 4 months after the explosion. It wasn't until 3 years later that the fallen soldiers' families learned the truth of their loved ones' deaths. And even then, the disaster remained shrouded in mystery. Even some of the survivors still don't know the full truth about what happened. In 2023, a 7-part NPR podcast called Taking Cover shed some unprecedented light on what happened in Fallujah that day. It was released after an investigation that began when NPR Pentagon correspondent Tom Bowman got a tip that the mortar strike was caused by friendly fire, and that it was covered up because a powerful politician's son was involved in the incident. First Lieutenant Duncan D. Hunter is the son of former U.S. Representative Duncan Hunter Sr. At the time of the explosion, Duncan Hunter Jr. was working in the command center that mistakenly approved the launch. Duncan Hunter Sr. was serving as the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee as well. A years-long NPR investigation uncovered evidence indicating that there really may have been a massive cover-up. And it may have been to shield Duncan Hunter Jr. and others from facing consequences for the mistake that cost 2 Marines their lives and forced at least 3 others into an early retirement. The findings indicate that while the mortar attack was approved by the battalion commander, Duncan Hunter Jr. allegedly pointed to the wrong target on the map. This detail is missing from official reports, which found 3 other military members responsible, although charges against them were dropped. Nobody seems willing to admit to Hunter's mistake on the record, and the battalion commander changed his story to say that another officer made the mistake Hunter was accused of. Bowman believes that Hunter got off with a deadly mistake scot-free. But for now, this officially remains a matter of speculation and not fact. Thanks for watching. Would you have a harder time forgiving your best friend for losing a sentimental piece of jewelry that you let them borrow? Or dropping your wallet into a storm drain while on vacation together? Let us know in the comments below.